Hello, Abracadabra fans and independent filmmakers like myself. Welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about something very important and very near and dear to my heart. Tabletop RPGs like Dungeons & Dragons. Why you, as a filmmaker, should be playing Dungeons & Dragons or any other tabletop RPG. Now, there's several reasons why you should be playing tabletop RPGs if you're a filmmaker. Because number one, it makes you a better filmmaker overall, and I'm going to tell you how. The first way it makes you better is world building. When you're creating your fantasy, your sci-fi, your horror, or really any genre of film, you're essentially building a world that you're showing for about 90 minutes for a feature film, less for a short, to your audience of a world that you've built, that you've populated with rules and characters and main characters and, extras, non-player characters and such. So you've built a world, right? In Dungeons & Dragons and other tabletop RPGs, you have to really flesh out a world, just like Tolkien did for Lord of the Rings or Martin did for Game of Thrones. World building is an incredibly important skill to have when it comes to movie making, comic book writing, and novel writing. World building is everything because that's where your characters live and breathe, on the screen or elsewhere. And there's several world building books even that you can buy if you don't want to play a tabletop RPG, but still incredibly helpful how it breaks down how to build a vibrant world that comes to life on the screen. Role-playing mastery, tips, tactics, and strategies for improving our participation in any role-playing game by one of the people who started it all, Gary Gygax, co-creator of Dungeons & Dragons. Even at your local Barnes & Noble or Amazon right now, you could pick up the Ultimate RPG Game Master's World Building Guide, available at any Barnes & Noble I've ever walked into. Great book. It's almost like a workbook that walks you through all the parts of world building. Super important. Doesn't matter, again, what kind of genre of film you're doing. Horror, sci-fi, fantasy, even romance. You're still building out a world. And it's very important. And of course, the most popular tabletop RPG game is Dungeons & Dragons, which we've all heard of, especially since Stranger Things and the popularity of it has risen during COVID and everything else. But you don't have to play Dungeons & Dragons. There are several other. You might be like, but Rob, I don't want to learn a whole rule system and own, a library of books just to play a game. I hear you, my friend. I hear you. There are other tabletop RPGs like Dungeons & Dragons that are very rules light, like Five Torches Deep, or Deathbringer, or Old School Essentials, or Dragonbane. These are what they call the old school renaissance of original D&D, brought to back in either like a shorter, more condensed form that's not as rule heavy and really allows you to just get in and play. But Rob, you're saying, I don't want to make another, Lord of the Rings. I want to do like superheroes. I want to make my own cinematic universe, like the Vixen's verse or the Marvel verse. Well, don't worry, they got you covered there too. There are lots of superhero RPGs, very helpful in world building, very helpful even in creating your characters for your screenplay, novel, or comic book. Blood of Heroes, which may or may not be in print by Pulsar Games, one of my favorite superhero RPGs of all time. Otherwise, there's Champions, there's Mutants and Masterminds, or maybe you want to do sci-fi. There's ones even for Star Wars, a Star Wars RPG. Several publishers have made them and everything. There's even been, yes, and just for a laugh, but it's a pretty good game actually, game system, Bunnies and Burrows. Your players play as bunnies in a burrow, and you set up a whole world where they play and exist and try to survive. It's also the first rule set that had martial arts in it in an RPG tabletop setting. Or there's space ones. Cosmic Patrol is one. It's been around for a long time. Very rules light, but very fun and endearing, especially if you're building a science fiction world. tabletop RPGs are so widespread genre-wise that there are even ones that just like focus on certain time periods, like the Spirit of 77, focuses on 1977 and, all the awesome pop culture stuff and kung fu tough guys that go along with it. Really cool. So there's something out there for you to play, whatever genre you're working on, novel-wise, screenplay-wise, or comic book-wise. But again, the reason I really want you to start playing is because it helps you not only build your world, it helps you build your characters for your screenplay, your novel, or your comic book. It helps you build out the adversaries to those characters and the supporting characters, which we call NPCs in tabletop role-playing games, non-player characters, NPCs. So you have your world, you have your characters and your setting, and then you make these things called adventures or scenarios or modules. They're just screenplays, essentially. They are just you as the game master or dungeon master being the film director, telling the characters where they are, what world they inhabit, what's going on around them, what other people other than them are doing, and even facilitate things like combat, which helps in your fight choreography down the line because you have to keep pace of it, and also helps you become a better storyteller. And the way it helps you become a better storyteller is when you've probably played board games, right? And sometimes, the board game is boring. And, you're laying back here in your chair. Maybe you're on your phone. Maybe you're talking to the cute guy or girl next to you, what have you. But you're not leaned into the game. Good storytelling makes you lean into the game more, lean into the story. Your audience is on the edge of their seat. They're excited to play. They're excited to be immersed in your world. Their lean-in angle towards the table or television is very high. So lean-in angle is increased dramatically through better storytelling. And you learn better storytelling by making up tabletop role-playing game adventures, quests, scenarios, and worlds for characters to inhabit. It also makes you a better director because as the game master or dungeon master, you have to keep those players engaged, that lean angle high. But you also have to know how to pace a story, how to direct action, how to direct drama, how to really engage not just your audience, but also your actors or players. And it's a huge benefit for actors because they make a character that inhabits that world, and then they have to bring, through role-playing, acting, that character to life. So it's always a great improv exercise in acting to be a part of any tabletop RPGs. I know several actors who, will never miss a game session when it comes down to it. And you can't be overwhelmed by it because, again, you could get into it at any level you want. You could go to your local hobby store, find a group that plays, and just join a group and start playing. Or if you're brave and you want to, set out on your own, you buy the rule books and such for whatever genre, whatever game you want, and read it up, make your campaign setting, make your adventure, to play in. The adventure is just your screenplay. The players are just improv actors in your film. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful way to exercise our craft further for very little money and a lot of fun. I highly recommend it. When I'm going to look at my phone right now, which I don't like to do during these videos, but I don't want to miss anybody. Several directors that and actors, big-time actors and directors, play Dungeons & Dragons and other tabletop role-playing games because they know the benefits of it, and it's helped them create their own worlds. The Russo brothers, they're big D&D players. Stephen Colbert, he has mentioned that he's an avid Dungeons & Dragons and Lord of the Rings fan. Vin Diesel, he used to play Dungeons & Dragons in The Complete Strategist in New York City. And he even wrote an introduction to one of the anniversary role-playing game D&D books. Jon Favreau, Matt Groening, I'm terrible at pronouncing names, I'm sorry, Matt. Chris Hardwick, Moby, Mike Myers, Patton Oswalt, Carl Urban, Nathan Fillion, Gerard Way, Will Wheaton, Robin Williams. I'm terrible at names, though. The woman who's in Daredevil, she's a huge proponent for RPG games and Dungeons and Dragons. She's fantastic at it, and the way she explains how to play them and how to get into them is amazing. Felicia Day from the Guild, she's a huge player of tabletop RPGs and World of Warcraft and everything in between. It helps you hone your craft. Be you a director, a filmmaker, a writer, an actor, anything. Tabletop RPGs are where it's at, my friend. Plus, you get to roll really cool looking dice and play with little figures sometimes. Although, I would say sometimes you don't get to play with figures because really all these tabletop RPG games are supposed to be the theater of the mind. So you're supposed to be able to imagine the world and your character, and everyone playing with you, from the game master, dungeon master, to the other players, should be able to visualize that world. And that, again, goes back into filmmaking. We are supposed to show, not tell. If you can show someone in their mind the world you've created, you, my friend, have created some powerful magic, and that magic belongs on Abracadabra. So get going with those fantasy movies and submit them to our film festival and contest, please, because I'd love to see some more, independent films that hit on the fantasy genre. So roll for initiative, start playing. You will not regret it. Thank you.